Imagine escaping slavery, finally reaching freedom, and then making a decision almost no one else would dare make. Going back. Again. And again. And again. Not for money. Not for fame. But to save others. In the 1800s, slave owners across America feared one woman more than almost anyone else. They called her dangerous. They called her a thief. Some even offered rewards for her capture. Yet she carried no army, held no political office, and possessed no wealth. Her name was Harriet Tubman, born into slavery in Maryland. She endured violence, hardship, and unimaginable cruelty from an early age. Most people in her position dreamed of escape. Harriet did something far more extraordinary. After gaining her own freedom, she repeatedly returned to slave territory. Each journey placed her life at risk. If captured, she could be beaten, sold, or killed. But Harriet refused to stop, guided by courage, determination, and an unshakable belief in freedom. She led men, women, and children through secret routes known as the Underground Railroad, through forests, across rivers, and past armed slave catchers. One mistake could mean disaster. Yet Harriet never lost a single passenger. Over time, her name became legendary. To those seeking freedom, she was a hero. To slave owners, she was a nightmare. How did a woman born into slavery become one of the most courageous figures in American history? How did she repeatedly outsmart those hunting her? And why does her legacy still inspire millions today? This is the incredible true story of Harriet Tubman, the woman slave owners feared most. Born into chains. Long before Harriet Tubman became a symbol of freedom, before thousands knew her name, before slave owners feared her movements, she was simply a little girl born into a world of cruelty. Harriet Tubman was born around 1822 in Dorchester County, Maryland. Her birth name was Araminta Ross. Most people called her Minty. From the moment she entered the world, she was considered property. Not a person, not a child. Property. Her parents, Harriet Green and Ben Ross, were enslaved. Like millions of other African Americans living under slavery, they had no control over their lives. Families could be separated without warning. Children could be sold away. And hope often felt impossible. As a young girl, Minty quickly learned how harsh slavery could be. She witnessed beatings, punishments, and constant fear. Even small mistakes could bring severe consequences. By the age of 6, she was hired out to another household. There, she was forced to work long hours caring for a baby. If the child cried during the night, Minty was beaten. If she fell asleep from exhaustion, she was beaten. If anything went wrong, she was blamed. The scars remained for the rest of her life. Yet even as a child, she showed remarkable courage. She resisted whenever she could. She challenged authority. And she refused to let slavery destroy her spirit. One day, a life-changing event occurred. While working in a store, an overseer ordered Minty to help capture another enslaved man who was attempting to escape. She refused. The man ran. The overseer became furious. He picked up a heavy metal weight and threw it. The object missed the escaping man and struck Minty directly in the head. The injury nearly killed her. 4 days. She drifted between life and death. Even after she recovered, the damage never fully healed. For the rest of her life, she suffered from severe headaches, sudden blackouts, and vivid dreams. Many people saw these episodes as a weakness, but Harriet viewed them differently. She believed they brought her closer to God. They strengthened her faith and gave her a sense of purpose. As she grew older, the injustice around her became impossible to ignore. She watched families torn apart, friends sold away, children separated from their parents forever. Every year, The fear grew stronger. Would she be next? Would her family be sold? Would she ever know freedom? By her 20s, the answer became clear. If she stayed, she would remain a slave for the rest of her life. If she left, she could lose everything, including her life. But Harriet had already learned something important. Freedom was worth any risk. And soon, she would make a decision that would change American history forever. By 1849, Harriet Tubman had reached a breaking point. She had spent her entire life in slavery. She had endured beatings, hard labor, and constant fear. But now, a new danger threatened everything. Her owner had died, and there were rumors that enslaved people from the plantation might soon be sold. For Harriet, this was terrifying. Being sold could mean never seeing her family again, never seeing her friends again, never seeing the place she called home. The threat forced her to make a choice: stay or run. Neither option was safe. If she remained, she would likely spend the rest of her life in bondage. If she escaped and was caught, she could be whipped, imprisoned, or even killed. But Harriet had already decided. Freedom was worth the risk. One night, she quietly left the plantation. The darkness became her shield. She carried almost nothing. No vealt, no protection, no guarantee of survival. Only determination and faith. The journey ahead was dangerous. Slave catchers patrolled roads and towns. Newspapers regularly published runaway slave notices. Rewards were offered for capture. Every stranger could be a threat. Every sound in the night could signal danger. Harriet traveled mostly after sunset. She followed rivers, moved through forests, and avoided major roads whenever possible. Often, she relied on secret information passed between people who opposed slavery. These hidden networks would later become known as the Underground Railroad. Despite its name, it was not a real railroad. There were no trains, no stations. Instead, it was a network of brave individuals who secretly helped enslaved people reach freedom. Safe houses provided shelter. Guides offered directions. Families risked their own safety to protect those fleeing slavery. Each step north brought Harriet closer to freedom. But fear never disappeared. At any moment, someone could recognize her. At any moment, everything could end. Then finally, after weeks of uncertainty, Harriet crossed into Pennsylvania, a free state. For the first time in her life, she was legally free. Years later, she described the moment. She said she looked at her hands to see if she was the same person. Everything seemed different. The sun shone brighter. The fields looked different. The world felt new. Freedom. At last. Yet something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling complete happiness, Harriet felt sadness. She had escaped, but her family remained behind. Her parents were still enslaved. Her brothers and sisters were still enslaved. Friends she loved were still trapped. Freedom felt incomplete without them. Many people in her position would have focused on building a new life, finding work, creating security. Avoiding danger. Harriet chose a different path, a far more dangerous path. She decided to go back into slave territory, back into danger, back to the very place she had risked everything to escape, because freedom meant little to her if others remained in chains. And soon, Harriet Tubman would begin a mission that would make her one of the most courageous women in American history. A mission that would turn her into a legend. Most people who escaped slavery never went back. The risk was simply too great. Freedom was precious. And once it was achieved, few were willing to gamble it away. But Harriet Tubman was different. Only a year after gaining her freedom, she returned to Maryland. Not for herself, but for her family. She knew exactly what awaited her if she was caught. slave catchers, prison, violence, possibly death. Yet she went anyway. Under the cover of darkness, Harriet secretly traveled south, avoiding roads, crossing forests, moving carefully through areas where she could be recognized. Her first mission was a success. She guided members of her family to freedom. But once they were safe, she realized something. There were countless others still trapped. Mothers, fathers, children, families living with the same fear she had once known. She couldn't ignore them. And so Harriet made another journey. Then another. And another. Soon, she became one of the most important figures in the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad was not a train. It was a secret network of safe houses, guides, churches, and abolitionists who helped enslaved people escape to freedom. The journey was incredibly dangerous. Runaway notices filled newspapers. Rewards were offered. Slave catchers hunted relentlessly. Many fugitives were armed with nothing but hope. Harriet became known as a conductor on the Underground Railroad, a guide, a protector, a leader. She planned every detail carefully. Travel usually happened at night. The North Star often served as a guide. Safe houses provided temporary shelter. Trusted allies helped along the route. Harriet used disguises, changed directions unexpectedly, and constantly adapted to avoid detection. Her intelligence was remarkable. If she suspected danger, she immediately altered the plan. If rumors of slave catchers spread, she found another route. Again and again, she stayed one step ahead. The people she guided trusted her completely. Many called her Moses, a reference to the biblical leader who guided his people to freedom. The name fit perfectly. Harriet became a symbol of hope. One story tells of a frightened escapee who wanted to turn back. The danger felt overwhelming. The fear was too much. Returning would have endangered everyone. According to legend, Harriet calmly raised a pistol and said, "You'll be free or die." The group continued. No one turned back. For Harriet, success depended on unity. Every life mattered. Every person had to reach freedom. Mission after mission, she delivered people safely north. Slave owners grew increasingly frustrated. New rewards were offered for her capture. Rumors spread about the mysterious woman helping enslaved people disappear. But Harriet remained elusive, like a shadow, appearing suddenly, then vanishing again. Over the years, she made approximately 13 rescue missions, and helped dozens of enslaved people reach freedom directly. Many more benefited from the network she strengthened. What made her achievements even more remarkable was that she never lost a passenger. Not one. Every successful mission weakened the institution of slavery. Every escape challenged a system built on fear. And every journey made Harriet Tubman more legendary. To those seeking freedom, she was a hero. To slave owners, she was a nightmare. But an even greater challenge was approaching, because America was moving toward civil war, and Harriet Tubman was about to take her fight for freedom onto an even larger battlefield. By 1861, the United States was at war. The nation had split apart, North against South, freedom against slavery. The Civil War had begun. For Harriet Tubman, this was more than a political conflict. It was personal. She had spent years fighting slavery in secret. Now, an opportunity had emerged to fight it openly. Harriet offered her services to the Union Army. At first, many military leaders weren't sure what role a former enslaved woman could play. But Harriet possessed something incredibly valuable: knowledge. She understood the landscape of the South. She knew how secret networks operated, and she had years of experience moving undetected through dangerous territory. Soon, Union commanders recognized her unique abilities. Harriet began working as a nurse. She cared for wounded soldiers, prepared herbal medicines, and helped those suffering from disease. But her role quickly expanded, because Harriet was far more than a nurse. She became a scout, a spy, and an intelligence agent, using contacts she had developed over many years. Harriet gathered information from enslaved people living behind Confederate lines. These men and women knew valuable secrets, troop movements, supply routes, military positions, information that could save lives. Harriet organized networks of informants. She listened carefully, collected intelligence, and delivered critical reports to Union commanders. Her information proved remarkably accurate. Time and time again, she provided details that helped Union forces plan operations. But Harriet wasn't content to stay behind the scenes. In 1863, she participated in one of the most extraordinary missions of the Civil War, the Combahee River Raid. Working alongside Union Colonel James Montgomery, Harriet helped plan an attack along South Carolina's Combahee River. The mission targeted Confederate supply lines and plantations. Union gunboats moved through dangerous waters. Confederate forces were caught by surprise. As the raid unfolded, something remarkable happened. Enslaved people rushed toward the Union boats. Men, women, children, families desperate for freedom. Harriet had helped spread word that liberation was coming. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds raced toward safety. Some carried children in their arms. Others left everything behind. All were willing to risk everything for freedom. By the end of the operation, more than 700 enslaved people had been liberated. It was one of the most successful rescue missions of the Civil War, and Harriet Tubman played a central role. Historians believe she became the first woman in American history to help plan and lead an armed military expedition. It was an extraordinary achievement, especially for someone who had once been considered property. The girl born into slavery, the woman who escaped in darkness, was now helping shape the course of a war. Yet even after these accomplishments, Harriet sought little recognition. She wasn't motivated by fame or wealth. Her mission had always been the same: freedom, justice, and helping others. As the Civil War neared its end, slavery itself was beginning to crumble. But Harriet's fight wasn't over, because after the war, she would face a new challenge: how to continue fighting for equality in a nation that was finally free, but far from fair. In 1865, the Civil War ended. Slavery was abolished. The institution Harriet Tubman had spent her life fighting was finally destroyed. For many people, this would have been the end of the story. A time to rest, a time to enjoy peace, a time to finally live without struggle. But Harriet Tubman was not like most people. She had spent her entire life helping others, and she wasn't ready to stop. After the war, Harriet settled in Auburn, New York. Her home became a place of refuge, a place where people in need could find help. Formerly enslaved families, poor neighbors, and elderly African Americans often turned to Harriet for support. Despite her fame, she was far from wealthy. In fact, for much of her life, she struggled financially. The government was slow to recognize her wartime service. Years passed before she received even a small pension. Yet Harriet continued giving, even when she had little herself. She believed freedom meant more than simply breaking chains. It meant dignity, opportunity, and equality. As the years passed, Harriet became involved in another growing movement, the fight for women's rights. At a time when women could not vote, could not hold many positions of power, and were often excluded from public life, Harriet raised her voice once again. She spoke at gatherings, worked alongside suffragists, and encouraged women to demand equal rights. Many admired her courage, because Harriet understood something important. Freedom is never fully won. Each generation must continue the fight for justice. Throughout her later years, people increasingly recognized her extraordinary achievements. The woman who had once escaped slavery in secret had become a national symbol of courage. Children learned her story. Communities celebrated her legacy. And those she had helped never forgot her sacrifices. In 1908, Harriet helped establish a home for elderly African Americans. It was one of her final acts of service. Even in old age, she remained devoted to helping others. By then, her health had begun to decline. The head injury she suffered as a child continued to affect her, but her spirit remained strong. On March 10, 1913, Harriet Tubman passed away at approximately 90 years old. She died surrounded by people who respected and loved her. The little girl born into slavery had become one of the most respected women in American history. Today, her legacy reaches far beyond the Underground Railroad. She represents courage in the face of fear, hope in the face of oppression, and the power of one person to change countless lives. Harriet never commanded a great army. She never held high political office. She never possessed great wealth. Yet her impact was extraordinary, because true greatness is not measured by power. It is measured by the lives we touch, the people we help, and the courage we show when doing what is right. Harriet Tubman risked everything for freedom, again and again, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary, and because she believed every human being deserved to live free. More than a century after her death, her story continues to inspire millions around the world. A reminder that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move forward despite it. And few people in history demonstrated that courage more powerfully than Harriet Tubman. She escaped slavery, then returned to save others. She became a conductor, a spy, a soldier, and a symbol of freedom. Slave owners feared her. The oppressed trusted her. History remembers her. Her name was Harriet Tubman, and her silent strength changed America forever.